Today's guest on Mindful Leaders is Hovhanness Nikoghosyan. Born in Yerevan, Armenia, Hovhannes is a political scientist and the executive director of the Armenian Spiritual Revival Foundation, which was recently founded by Noubar Afeyan. During his doctoral studies, Hovhannes briefly moved to the U.S. as a fellow for the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, and later returned as the Asso Davitian Scholar at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. He returned to Armenia to work at the office of the President of Armenia, eventually becoming the aide to the President. In 2021, Hovhannes began his ambitious journey to serve Armenian communities through the Revival Foundation. In this segment, we delve into Hovhannes' journey and touch upon topics such as leadership, collective healing, the significance of grace, good mentors, and spirituality. Hovhannes, what a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining me on Mindful Leaders today.
Pleasure is all mine. Thanks for having me.
So, as usual, during all of each of our episodes, we try to understand the person's soul, their heart, and I usually like to start off with their past. So tell me a little bit about your childhood or the environment in which you grew up that would help us understand Hovhannes today.
Well, a very regular childhood of anyone born in Armenia in 1980s, with a childhood in late 1980s, early 1990s, with all the hardships, but also, sense of elevation probably in the streets because of independence in 1991, the whole movement, then the victory in the war. So a very regular childhood.
You all four of your grandparents are from Yerevan?
It's safe to say that all of them are from Yerevan, or born in the vicinity of town, and I proudly consider myself to be Yerevanci.
Right. And I think your great-grandparents, I think one of them come from the region of Kars, is that correct? From former Western Armenia?
Harput.
Harpert.
Yeah.
But they were uprooted a couple of times, right? By the time they got to Yerevan.
Right. So the parents of my paternal grandfather got uprooted during the genocide years, eventually settled in the vicinity of Yerevan. Then Sovietization happened. They were, as they would say in 1920s, by the measures of 1920s, they were probably gulags or rich people. So they were warned the night before by the neighbors that they're going to come after you in the morning. So, take your things, whatever you can take, and the kids, and then leave, which they did, settled without any great means of supporting their lives, now in Yerevan. That's the house that where eventually I was born.
And where you grew up with your sister Lilith, right? Who's a doctor.
Right.
A
medical biologist, to be
medical
precise.
Biologist,
yeah.
Right, okay. You, as a political scientist and a person who is fascinated by history, you actually worked as a scholar and a researcher in different institutions. And I keep thinking about this episode of yours where you collaborated or worked with very prominent figures in Washington when you were with the Center for Strategic International Center. Mm-hmm. Or studies. CSIS. I usually call it CIS, but
CSIS, yeah.
So there you encounter Zbigniew Brzezinski. Mm-hmm. You also see Henry Kissinger. And throughout your entire time when you're coming and going from Yerevan to Washington or to the US for your studies, whether Duke or Fletcher, you encounter very interesting people like Asso Davitian. So obviously I think about during these times, have you ever thought about the values that make a good leader? What for you is a good leader?
That's an excellent question. That's a question that I've been thinking in the past few years, especially with
all that's happening.
With all what's happening in the wider region, in the wider Middle East, so to say, not just in Armenia. I deeply believe in ethics and values. And I think that no good leader really can lead people without, some access of such values and some internal, standards of what is good and what is bad. Otherwise, if you don't do that, in the world of politics at least, you're going to end up a lot in political expediency.
Right.
And
But I
that's
mean,
leading to disaster very often.
Is that what you've seen? I mean, would you be able to define, for instance, that being enough as your boundary for what's a good leader? I mean, a person that knows right from wrong, but is that enough to be able to, lead or serve or help people really believe in some kind of a hope? I think of this, the reason why I'm going on a tangent right now is because I think of the organization where you're actually working right now, which is as an executive director for the Armenian Spiritual Revival Foundation that was actually developed by Noubar Afeyan, right? Another good leader, right? And co-founded also with the Catholicosat as well. And now you've taken on this role yourself as a leader. So with the people who have inspired you and you've seen the actual values that are important for you, what is your role as an executive director today? And how do you lead that foundation?
Probably the other thing that I would say is critically important is some education. And I do not necessarily mean education and proficiency in whatever narrowed down field, but some education to understand others' minds, other worlds, and some education to understand others in general, right? Not just your country, but other countries, other people, other cultures. And that's one. And second, that I've come to find very important, that is character. That is probably one thing that you cannot be educated for. That's something that you either have, you either come to develop by ways of interacting with others, or you are incapable of doing, filling in certain roles, for example, right? So all the people, all the very prominent people that some of whom I'm very happy to call my friends, I have encountered with in the past years, have showed with their own example that all that the values, ethical standards, the character, and being true to your character, being true to whoever you are, and always this curiosity of your mind to never stop really getting something new, learning something new. I've come to realize that all that is important to make a good leader in whatever you do. Now, in the world of mental health that I've been busy with in the past 2 years, in the world of spirituality, in the world of university leadership, in the world of politics, you name it. Mm-hmm. So all those things combined probably are very important in any field that you aspire to lead other people. It's probably the one last thought is that it is very difficult, if possible at all, to lead without yourself being the example.
Right. You said spirituality. What do you mean by that? What is spirituality?
It's a complex web of values, to me, that is probably bigger than just religiosity, than just your religious views. This complex web of views and values that you treat others, and in one way or another also expect reciprocity. For example, care, right? We very often tell each other, take good care of yourself, but do we see any responsibility in ourselves of helping others to take good care of themselves? Showing care, that's, mindfulness of those issues probably is very important. That's eventually what and why I ended up being where I am now. With our organization, meaning.
Yeah, with the foundation. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about, very briefly. I mean, I know there's been a lot of coverage about the foundation, but this is something that is pretty unique, and I've come to know a little bit more about the work that you do with the Armenian Spiritual Revival Foundation. However, I'm always questioning. It's great that you've actually brought in the church to be involved in this kind of a trauma-informed and trauma or healing, and this word is very tricky, the word healing, because you tend to think it's a medical healing, but it's more of a spiritual healing. But this approach that you take, describe to us a little bit about the foundation very briefly for those who don't know, and then tell me why the church, and how would the church help people who do not want to be part of a dogma or religious institution?
Behind our foundation, or I should say at the roots of our foundation, is Noubar's vision to take the best of the three, you would say otherwise, three different worlds. That is the world of the church, the world of history experts, and the world of psychology. So producing such mental health vaccine, I should say, or method of work with people that find themselves in post-traumatic stress situations, following wars, following different crises that different survival episodes in our lives, where in our case we would combine this whole rich history that the Armenian people have endured over centuries at facing different survival challenges, not least during genocide years, but also before, and how we really revived ourselves over these past centuries, and learn some lessons from there, and familiarize people who are at situations of distress today by showing them examples of other people just like them who have, notwithstanding difficulties, have endured these difficulties and revived, went all this journey between revival and all the way to thriving. And there are many prominent examples that we know about in diaspora, but there are also histories of regular people that we can better probably familiarize ourselves with. And last but not least, also the Armenian Apostolic Church, which has been for more than 17 centuries, has been the longest serving institution in the lives of Armenians, including times when we were not lucky enough to have a statehood, which has been the institution who nurtured our life and preserved us as Armenians. So they have accumulated a lot of very relevant sets of traditions and approaches of how help people in distress, well beyond the dogmas of religion, well beyond the dogmas of Christianity. And we have been blending this for the past 2 years. We have been trying different approaches, and finally, I think exactly around a month ago, we have went public on this. And starting this fall, we're going to offer services to people throughout Armenia. And the vision is, in other words, to combine the best of these three worlds. That is history, the Armenian historical experience of survivalism, the spiritual values, Christian spiritual values, obviously, and last but not least, obviously, also psychology, the most cutting-edge methods in modern psychology that there exist in the world. We have established some good partnerships, and in other words, we're going in this direction.
Do you not see a lot of complacency or indifference from Armenians? First of all, what does it mean to be an Armenian for you today? And how do you try to address many of us who have become so complacent to everything that's happening politically or not just in Armenia, around the world, that sense of indifference. How do you fight that? So 2 questions I guess I'm asking you and posing you. What does it mean to be an Armenian today, and how do you address issues of indifference and complacency?
Well, quick footnote that I do not believe that there is complacency and indifference. And our studies have revealed that. I'll return to that in a second. But your first question to what does it mean to be an Armenian, I would probably use the word that a copyright to which belongs to Noubar. He likes to speak about Armenians as super survivors, as people who have endured a lot and still were around. And many of us are really going through this revival journey and eventually thriving, and not just in Armenia, but also elsewhere in diaspora, for many reasons that we can discuss. So to me, I think I find that description very convincing, given the facts that we have around. That's one. Second, our foundation has piloted a program in 14 different communities, 14 different community meetings in 6 different communities, and we have worked with around 1,000 people, with different backgrounds, different social, educational, different age distribution was quite wide, and we have not seen any indifference. In fact, our events were attended, our community events were attended by both the war veterans, their family members, the family members of the slain heroes of the war, but also a very important segment of our society of those whose lives have not been impacted by the war at all. Neither of these groups have shown indifference to the wounds of each other, to the hardships of each other. In fact, one of the most common sentences that we have heard anywhere between Gyumri, Yerevan, Armavir, Masis, Abovyan, and elsewhere is that I almost quote, like hundreds of people were telling us that I didn't know that others like me exist. By that, they neither meant their educational background, nor they meant their social status, their whatever. They meant the psychological hardships that our people are going through since the war, since 2020, maybe also before, but I think 2020 exacerbated all this. And what we how we evaluated this feedback, so to say, from hundreds of people, men, women, all sorts of different people with different backgrounds. What we have evaluated is that there is a great deal of objectivity to claim that there is some sense of learned helplessness in our society, which is why people have closed down, and that is giving this wrong impression that they don't care. We have seen the opposite, quite the opposite.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's probably because also there is at least in my opinion, a sense of lack of human connection. I think we don't connect with one another like we used to.
Are we talking about the impact of social networks?
Well, I mean, yes, of course, yeah. I mean, I just feel like there's a disconnect, even within, small communities in the region of Armenia. I mean, I think media has changed that a lot and the way we approach things. But in the past, obviously, we really felt the need, and we had that kind of a healthy relationship with others. That human connection was there. Whereas now it's not the same. It's our response is to a screen. Our response is based on what another person said via a screen. So this is, I think what you're doing is very, admirable, because it enables community members to actually sit together and to share. Even as at the most vulnerable sentiments that we don't usually tend to share, and that is very private. But you kind of build that sense of trust in that kind of a circle with the work that you do to help people feel that they can open up eventually because that sense of trust has grown. No, I mean, I've seen some of the work that you've done, and I think it's just great because there is a lack of that kind of institutionalized trauma-informed care. You know, we do have different institutions, whether it's a psychologist or a school or a mental health professional, but this kind of a community-based activity and you know, the tasks that you take on, I think will lead to very positive results. Well, at least a very different, you know, approach to how we, or am I not wrong?
We very much hope that
yeah.
that will be the case. And one other thing that I really want to weigh in on the complacency argument is that I think one thing that we have discovered, that we have seen in these different communities, talking to different people, working with these different people in large or small groups, we have discovered that you just scratch the surface of their skin and you see a lot of, you know, this sense of commitment to each other in one way or another.
Like, what you mean, triggering them, you mean, in terms of triggering them? Is that what you mean by scratching?
Probably taking off their shield,
yeah.
Right? That somehow we feel that we have to have in the society where we live. When you do that, the commonalities among people
are more evident. Right?
Are more evident, and they resurface much better and shine much brighter, as opposed to the life that we see in our social bubbles, in our social networks, where we judge our few people that we see on our screen as the whole of the society. That's not the case. I
still see that there are people that have distanced themselves from the church. I think I would like to see our clergy, really revamping and advancing in the ways where they can approach, people to speak to their hearts in the language that is much more modern, not just, reciting the Bible. Is that what we're hoping to get with the foundation as well? Or is that how you see, when I say revamping, it just means retraining, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's not that they're bad people. I just think that there is a matter of speaking in a language that is resonant, to the population.
So following the, I think a very quick review of history would be helpful here. Following an age of persecution under the communists, the church suddenly finds itself in a situation where it can grow.
Right.
This is 1991, right, with independence. And the number of the clergymen, especially the priesthood, between 1991 to 2024 has grown exponentially. Which
in what
means
sense? Grown in
physical numbers.
Oh, right. Okay, numbers.
Right, the people who graduate either
from the monastery,
seminary, the Georgian seminary, or are ordained as priests in later stages of their life. So the numbers have grown exponentially, which means that the church as an institution barely really had time over the past 30 years to focus on more substantial education of the clergymen. To respond to the needs of the society, which itself has been changing in the past 30, 35 years, right? In the independence period in particular. So I think we find ourselves in a situation of a perfect storm. One, for us, the foundation, we are toiling hard to follow this vision that I have, defined, to reinvent the most effective and efficient ways of, first of all, helping ourselves as Armenians by reviewing our history, understanding who we are as Armenians. You're asking about being Armenian, and believing that there are some, good seeds to be reinvented, so to say, and be planted in the ground to, bear fruit. And second, the church also finds itself in a situation of a perfect storm with all things that are and have been happening, with the exponential growth in particular of the numbers of the clergymen. They also have to reinvent the ways how to educate the clergymen. So to say, they're kind of catching up with the other churches, be that the Protestant church or the Catholics, who have had centuries right? To develop their educational curricula, etc. Now I think they find themselves in a situation where they are also reinventing ways how to equip their clergymen better to respond to the needs of the society. Keep in mind that with all this war and the aftermath of the war, very often the clergymen have been on the, same as the psychologists, by the way, have been on the front line. They have been, in many cases, the first responders to the people in need, first of all in psychological need. And they did the best that they could. Now I think both us as foundation and them as clergymen, or all of this cohort of first responders. And now we're making it even harder with not just the war in Armenia, but also COVID, right? Before it. So all these first responders, including the clergymen, have to, I think, find themselves in a situation where they need to stop and reinvent the ways how they educate themselves in order to help the public better, to cater to the needs of the public better.
Right. One final question.
Please.
What's the best piece of advice you've received in your life? Or maybe, what's the best piece of advice you've given? Either or, however you wish to address it.
It's a good question. I think one thing that immediately came to my mind.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
You did.
I'm sorry.
The words very often repeated by my good friend and mentor, Hovhanness, who I mentioned earlier, who has done marvelous things for Armenia without Armenia or Armenians knowing about that. That's true. For Armenians, giving them, in one case, education, but also more than just education in many ways. He used to repeat quite often to me the importance and the need to always be mindful of doing things with grace.
Oh yeah.
Even things that that unfortunately are going to bring pain to whoever you are dealing with.
Do it with grace. That's very nice. It's powerful. I think it's beautiful. You know, Hovhannes, I look at you. You're still a very young professional. As you've accomplished so much in such a short period of time. You're very driven. You are making an impact. And have been making an impact, not just in terms of your research and as a lecturer to other students, right? Because that's also, sharing your knowledge to others, and that's also leadership in many ways. But also through the foundation with this role as an executive director, I think of the title Armenian Spiritual Revival. I mean, that's a very profound title, and it's a very ambitious, program. But I've seen, like you said, you planting the seeds, and I think there is really much to observe in the coming years where you'll be seeing much more tangible results. I like the fact that we're finally working on trauma-informed care and through the foundation, and I really look forward to seeing all the wonderful success stories you'll be sharing with us hopefully in the future.
Thank you, Lara, for this opportunity, and especially for putting a spotlight on the Armenian Spiritual Revival Foundation. I should say that with Noubar Afeyan and with the Armenian Church on both sides of this foundation, it would have been a crime not to be ambitious. And we are really working hard to make an impact, and we hope that all different projects that the foundation has already developed or will develop with different partners in Armenia or abroad is going to make an impact in Armenia. That's eventually what drives all of us in whatever we do, be that university education, be that leading an NGO, or just a regular person in the street. You eventually go to work. Your motivation is not just earning financial means to support your family. It's also bringing impact to the larger, to others, to the larger society, more to the people more than who you are. That's is probably making us humans.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Hovhannes, for being here.
Thank you for having me, Laura.